Hi there, and welcome to the very first podcast of the Footie Femme Fatale podcast. This is a women's football podcast, and I want to welcome you to this first listen, first watch, whatever you're watching or listening to. My name is Tammy, and I will talk you through exactly what this podcast is about, why you should follow it, and much more. So stay tuned. Turn the volume on for a woman's football show. You're listening to Footie Femme Fatale, a women's football podcast. All right, I'm so excited to talk about the first episode here at the Footie Femme Fatale podcast. And I want to first of all mention who I am, why I'm creating this podcast, and what you can expect from this podcast. So first of all, my name is Tammy. I am your host. I am one of several hosts through this podcast, but I'm going to be your main weekly update podcaster or host, as you will. And why is that? So if we talk about women's football, it's obviously coming from a world of passion. And how did that start with me? So I actually wasn't really interested in football per se. The men's football, yes, I've watched the Euros, the World Cup. I'm from the Netherlands, so I supported my nation, the Dutch national team, and that's pretty much it. I didn't really follow any of the local leagues. I didn't follow any trends or athletes per se, so I wasn't really up to date about anything, to be honest. So what happened? What changed? I'm not an athlete. I don't even play football. So where did that passion come from? Back in 2019, there was the World Cup with the women's football. And the US was playing against the Netherlands in the final. Surprise, surprise. And they lost 2-0, so they didn't win the World Cup. But that was the first time I kind of grew into women's football, because it was a big deal, and they won the Euros prior to that, so in 2017. And obviously, I wanted to know more about the team at the time, because I only knew the men's team, let's be honest. So I dived deeper into these athletes, and I became a fan of Danielle van der Donk. So that was the first time I kind of became a fan, but then I didn't do anything with it because, I was just, enjoying life. Fast forward to 2023, when the World Cup in Australia and New Zealand was hosted. And at my job at the time, I was asked to do a piece about the World Cup and the influences for the LGBTQ community, but also the women in general, how it compares to the men, if there was any popular athletes, like in terms of followers, all of that. So this is really when I hit my research and tried to figure out, like, what is women's football and why is it so popular, or why is it unpopular? And I really saw, watching the games at the World Cup, it was televised, so I could actually follow it. I realized that there was so much unheard of. There were so many implications, so many wrong, what's the word? Just ignorance, basically. And I wanted to become a patriot, wanted to be one of the voices that people can hear. Literally, you're listening to this podcast, so now you hear my voice. But also wanted to share my thoughts and say, like, women's football is here, it's growing, it's always been here, but nobody's really looking into it. So this podcast in particular is going to focus more on the European continent and what's happening with those athletes here in Europe. So that's the local teams, the national teams, the local leagues, all of that. So when 2024 kicked off last year, as you're listening to it now, it's 2025. I decided, if I really want to support women's football, I obviously have to watch one of these games one day. So I went crazy and I booked a ticket to Spain to go and see the semi-final of Spain Netherlands in the Nations League, which was in Sevilla at the time. I have a funny story about that and how that unravels as well. So I was a full-on fan. I was like, okay, if I'm going to be a full-on fan, I'm going to go all the way and travel all the way to Spain to see the Dutch national team. So I went there. I actually had a huge banner of Danielle van der Donk. I'll insert a picture here. You can see it's huge. And that was the first time I saw them. Unfortunately, they lost, but it was a really interesting experience, to say the least. The stadium was way too big for the game, but that's when it supported me to be more supportive. Like, I want to support women's football more, and buying a ticket, which was in the end only €5, was one way to go. So if I look back at that, that was a really crazy experience. And I've been to several games throughout the year last year. So I've also flew to Finland.
Clubje Oranje fans achter de kant van Finland.
That's actually when I had some sort of contact with Danielle van der Donk. So, Dan, if you're watching this, you know who I am. You've seen me several times, and you've seen my banner. And also, the banner was finally picked up by the NOS. I'll insert a little GIF here as well.
Past bij een affiche als Nederland Verenigde.
The last game I've visited was actually all the way in Twente, in Enschede, where I watched Twente Celtic, which was another new experience, because Champions League football is only going to be popular if it's like the quarterfinal or the semi-final here. So it's really interesting to see, obviously, if we compare it to men's football, that there's not a market for it yet, right? Nobody's picking up as of yet. So I want to be part of that change. I want to see it grow. I want to see women's football grow into what men's football already is. So it's going to be a challenge. But hey, this is why I make this podcast. So I've already given you several reasons why I'm creating this podcast, but we will discuss, obviously, the games, the athletes, not only my personal story, but also the athletes, the development, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, plus, whatever the athletes are doing on and off the pitch. So there's lots of things to talk about, and I can go on about this for hours, but obviously I'll try to structure this podcast as much as I can. So you'll have weekly updates from me, yours truly, about the games that have passed, the games that will continue, but also, what's happening off and on the pitch. And then also we'll do a monthly discussion. So that's with my other two hosts, where we'll discuss, things like the ACL injury, the salary of the women football athletes, the international reach, like how many audience members do we have in the stands? And also the publicity, like why is Coca-Cola not picking up on these athletes, etc. So there's so much to talk about that it's hard to structure around, but we'll do a weekly update. We'll do a monthly update, which will have a discussion. Hopefully we can have some guests as well. We'll obviously discuss athlete of the month, the goal of the month, game of the month, anything like that, which will include, if you're watching this from YouTube, I can share a link. But if you're listening to this, then obviously you'll have to imagine how that goal happened. We'll also do a special series around the Euros in Switzerland. I am going to Switzerland to watch at least the group stages of the Netherlands. Unfortunately, we have not drawn favorable, so we'll probably see how far we can get. But I'm hoping we can go all the way to the final. So that's a lot of talk from what this podcast is. So now I just want to dive deeper onto what has happened in 2024. So a small recap. Obviously, a lot of things have happened. Just to name a few, it's another year of people suffering from the dreaded ACL injury. And from those people, we saw Jill Roord when she was playing with Manchester, Sam Kerr playing also, and then Victoria Pelova. I actually was there when that happened in Finland. So this is definitely a topic I think we should probably discuss the next time that we listen to, that we meet. What else? In 2024, there was a lot of emerging talents. Obviously, you see the shirt here. If you're watching this on YouTube, I have a shirt here for Esme Brugs. Yes, she's a Dutchie, but she's also has made a big progression throughout the year. So this is why I think she is one of the, the big women. We're not gonna say girls anymore. She's a big woman now, and she is just blasted with talent, and I think she can go far, far, far. We had the golden. What's it called? The Golden Ball. Is that what's it called? Yeah. For Aitana Bonmati, also from Barcelona. We had, what else? The Champions League final, which I witnessed in Bilbao. That was between Olympique Lyon and FC Barcelona, and Barcelona won. So that was also really interesting for me because Bilbao is obviously in Spain, so there was a lot of Barcelona fans. And I was there in the stands, and thankfully next to me was a French guy, so we rooted for Olympique Lyon. I'll insert a little clip of that here. So lots of things happened, and lots of things we can look forward to. So before we go to that part, we obviously have a winter break, or the athletes have a winter break. For some of them, it's like 2 weeks. Others, it's 3 weeks. And what kind of things were they up to? What were the athletes doing? So I'm following all of the athletes, or I'm trying to follow most of them at least. There were a lot that were just spending time with their families. Some would actually look up the wind, like I can't talk. Some would actually go and do some winter stuff. Some would all the way go to Bali. I saw Wendy Renard was in Bali to look up the sun, basically. So it was really nice to see that, the athletes are just normal people, just like you and I. So that didn't change. A lot of marriages as well. So there was 2 marriages or 2 weddings that I saw. One of them was Lindsay Horan, and then the other was Emily van Egmond, the Australian player. So it's an interesting season. Like when there's a break, I guess it's time to either get married or get engaged. So I saw Shaki Groene, get engaged. So that was also an interesting thing to see. What else? So now that we're post-winter break, obviously they're going to continue the season. There's going to be some cups involved as well. And the teams are now getting into a routine, getting back to the routine, and also maybe going on training camps. So there's a bunch of players or a bunch of teams, let's say, that are currently in the sun training. I'd be very envious of that. So Manchester City is in Abu Dhabi. Great, nice and warm. I know Feyenoord, the Dutch team from Rotterdam, is actually in Doha at the moment. And then I saw Chelsea is in Portugal. There's probably more teams that I've missed that are also in the sun having a training camp. So that's what's happening at the moment. Some of them obviously also just train at base camp, so in their local cities, and they're all just starting it up again. So in fact, this week the D1 Arkema League, so the French league, is already starting up. So is La Liga in Spain as well. So it's interesting for me to see that not all leagues start at the same time. So yeah, plenty to look forward to this month. What else this month? So I told you, D1 Arkema already started. The Women's Super League, which is the United Kingdom, will start from 17th to the 29th of January. Throughout those days, obviously, we'll start back up again. The Azerion Vrouwen Eredivisie in the Netherlands will start out next week as well, 18th of January. The German Bundesliga, the Frauen Bundesliga, will actually start at the end of January, so that's also interesting. They have a bit more time off, it seems. And then, most importantly, the Champions League draw will happen on February 7th as well. So that's going to be all of the 8 best teams from the group stages that are left and they'll have a draw. So we'll talk about that next time as well. So what else? So in 2025, there's just a lot of things happening. The Nations League will come back again. So the group stages will start in February, April, and the end of May and June. And then in May, at the end of May, or mid-May, let's say, we'll have the Champions League final in Lisbon. I'll also be there. So I'll probably have a little podcast or review from that there as well. And then, of course, the Euros 2025 in Switzerland will happen in July. So I'll also be there. I'll hopefully have some guests to talk with. And also, if you're interested and you're also in Switzerland, let me know and we can maybe collaborate, because I would love to know more and hear more about our women's football fans. So if you hear me, sign up. So how do you sign up? How do you get in contact with me? So if you found this podcast from our socials, then yay, good job. You nailed it. You already know where to find us. If you're a new listener, you can follow us on YouTube or Instagram. And you can find us with the handler name @Footie Femme Fatale. So we will be going live again on the February of 10th. So every 10th of the month, we'll do a monthly episode. And every week from then onwards, I'll do a weekly update as well. So yeah, we'll discuss the playoffs of the draw of the Champions League. We'll look forward to the Nations League. And then also we'll just discuss all the matches that happened in January. That's it. I hope you've enjoyed this very first podcast. If you have any questions, if you want to DM me, go for it @Footie Femme Fatale on Instagram or YouTube. And yeah, I wish you a nice end of the winter break season or pre-season or however you want to call it. And yeah, I'll see ya soon. Bye.